Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. Allahumma faqihna fid deen. I want to welcome you to another class of parables from the Quran. Inshallah, today we're going to be covering a parable from Surah Zumar. This is the 39th chapter of the Quran, or Surah of the Quran, and ayah number 29. In this example, Allah gives a parable of a slave, a person who has many masters, and a slave, a person who has only one master. So let's get into the topic and understand the lessons that we can learn from this amazing example Allah gives. Before we go into it, let me just confirm, if I cannot be heard, for example, my voice cannot be heard, or if there's any issue such like then please let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue. Let me just confirm if my voice can be heard. For the time being, we'll go. If there's any issue, inshallah, I will stop. Okay, so let's start, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ضرب الله مثلا رجلا فيه شركاء متشاكسون ورجلا سلما لرجل هل يستويان مثلا الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعقلون. Allah mentions in this ayah, ضرب الله مثلا. Allah strikes an example of what? رجلا فيه شركاء متشاكسون ورجلا سلما لرجل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an example of a man who is owned, meaning a slave, who is owned by quarreling partners, disputing partners, and another belonging exclusively to one man. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, are they equal? Are they equal in comparison? هل يستويان مثلا Alhamdulillah. All praise, all thanks, all gratitude is for Allah. بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون. But rather, most of them, they do not know. They do not understand this. They are la ya'lamun. They don't know. This is an amazing ayah of the Quran. In this ayah, what we learn is that Allah gives an example of two people. And I want to illustrate this example by putting you in a scenario. Imagine if you are working in a company and you don't have one boss, you have 6 bosses, and they all have different temperaments, and they all are actually not in line with each other. One boss says to you, I want you to come on Monday morning, and I want you to be wearing a suit, and I want you to do things this way. Another boss, he has different requirements. He says, come earlier. He says, I want you to start at 7, whereas the first one says start at 8. The third one, he says, you can come late, no problem. But you can come late in the morning, but I just want you to stay a few hours later in the day. So he says, you can come at 12, come at 1 p.m., but you have to leave later, leave at 8, leave at 9. Another boss, he says to you, I don't want you to work daytime hours. I want you to work nighttime hours. And then within your job, what the actual work that you're doing, let's say you're designing media, let's say you're designing posters for marketing. Each and every single one of them have different demands. They have different requirements, and they're telling you opposite things to do. Could you imagine the stress that you have? What time are you going to get to work? You don't want to get fired. You don't want to lose your job. So to please boss number 1, you're going to turn up at 7 a.m. And to please boss number 3, you're going to leave at 12. To Just talking about this is making me a little bit stressed, making you stressed. How would you be able to manage such a thing? This is just an example of having a normal job, but having people who are quarreling, who have different opinions, who are opposing each other, and you have to please them all. Now, imagine, compare that to a person having one boss who actually wants good for them, who actually cares for them more than those other bosses who just want you to work and who just want you to do your services and make the company money. This boss actually wants you to grow as a person. This boss actually wants you to benefit. This boss actually does things. The things that he asks you to do, he does them for your benefit. The things that he asks you not to do, he does them so that you won't be harmed. And you have to just listen to him. He asks you to come at a particular time. He's very easygoing. You can discuss anything that you want with him. And if there's any issues, you only have one person to deal with. Just thinking about that scenario, having one person to deal with, being under review from one person rather than many, you can see how that would be so much more easier, how you would have such an easy flow, how you would be able to discuss any issues that you have. And this is the work-based example. Now let's go back to the example that Allah gives in the Quran. Imagine a slave who has many masters. In the past and in the time of the Quran, this was common in the world, and this was the norm in the world, and that was slavery and people being owned by others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an example of a slave, and this was something that was very normal in that society. And even today, we can read about it and we can understand the circumstances of such people. One person has many masters. He has to please each and every one of them, and one person has one. Now, what is this example likened to? It's likened to a person who is worshipping or has masters in dunya. For example, a person, he wants to please his family. So he does things for his family. He's doing things for his under his family's pressure. The family does that certain things a certain way. So that's one pressure that he has. He's trying to please them. Another side is he has a desire for money. He wants to earn as much money as possible because he can see that success is through money and cars and buying a big house and buying the latest gadgets. So he has this drive. He wants to make his family happy as well, wants to give them time, wants to listen to his parents, wants to make his family happy, make his wife happy, make his kids happy. But at the same time, he wants to earn money. At the same time, this person has desires. He has desire for fame. He wants to be famous. He wants to be known by people. At the same time, he has other desires. He has the desire for wealth. He has the desire for becoming famous. He has the desire for being acknowledged amongst people. Different desires a person has. And then on top of that, he has influence and he has pressure coming from his family, his desires, money. Besides that, his society. Society is telling him, you as a man or you as a woman, this is expected of you. At this age, you should have this done. At this age, you should have this done. You should dress like this. You should look like this. This is how a wedding should be. This is how your events should be. This is what you should be doing on the weekend. And he has this pressure. And really, who can he please? Can he please his family? If he's pleasing them, he's going to have problems at work. If he's pleasing his boss only, then he's going to have problems in other areas. And what you notice is that this person is not happy. If we look at the world today, we have more gadgets, we have more ease, we have more easier access to food and water. If you look at our lives, the way that we, it's a joke amongst, kids, where their parents would tell you the difficulties they took to get to school. They like exaggerated stories of walking 10 miles in the snow and going past mountains. But the reality is, in the past, it was more difficult. Now, how easy is it? You can even do online. You can learn just like we're speaking right now. Instead of you having to come to a location and us meeting, you can be in the comfort of your home, at work, driving back home, and in different countries. And you can access this knowledge that we're trying to learn together. So if you look at the past, it was a lot more difficult. So it would make sense that life is easier. We have more gadgets. You've got air conditioners. You've got air conditioners in your house. You've got them in your car. You've got access to different fruits, even if it's not the season. You can food if you feel like having anything. You just go online, order it. You've got delivery apps. Everything is so easy. Everything is so accessible. So you would think that people are happier, but the reality is, if you go into any house, go and speak to different family members, you will find there's one person, if not one, there's multiple people. And those people, they are suffering from a type of anxiety, they are suffering from a type of depression. And this is not just one household, this is multiple households, which basically affects the whole society. The society is in a state of anxiety, and it's in a state of depression to a certain extent. And one of the main reasons, the reasons I'm bringing this up, is because we are trying to please so many different people. We're trying to please everyone. And then the contrast is, you have many different partners, you have many different masters, and then you have one master. The person who has many masters, his family, his society, money, his desires, all of these things. And then there's one person, brothers and sisters, do you know who his master is? His master is, and truly is, in terms of not just on his tongue, on his tongue, in his heart, and in his actions. His master is Allah, the one who created him. The one who made his heart. You give your heart to your creator. You give your life for your creator. You give your time for your creator. And your creator who created that heart, he can make that heart happy. That one person is going to be so happy. And so this is the example we're looking at today. The person who gives himself to Allah, you're going to see he's going to have such an easy life compared to others. Now, this doesn't mean there's not going to be difficulties, there's not going to be tests, but he knows that he only has to please Allah. Whether he is dressing, whether he's working, whether he's earning money, whether he's with family, in his youth, in his old age, in university, at home, in society, everywhere, he has one master. He just has to please Allah. Whether he's at a wedding and people are pressurizing him or her to do something that he doesn't want to, really. Or he's at work and people are pressurizing him to do something that he doesn't want to. What he does is he has a very simple formula in front of him. His formula is, I am a slave of Allah and I submit to Allah, and so I'm going to do whatever he wants. And that's basically everything that he wants to do. And you will see how he becomes a person who is truly happy because he submits to Allah. Now, I want to actually go into this example. This example, there's actually many things that we can learn from it, but one thing that we want to cover is these masters that we have, whether it's money, whether it's family, whether it's society, whether it's your desires. I want to actually look at these, and like I mentioned in previous classes, we don't want to just understand the example. So we understood the example of the slave and the many masters, and how you have Allah who's one master, and you have these different masters which are in the form of wealth, in the form of desires, etc. What we want to do in this class, in this month of Ramadan, is we want to actually understand how can we actually break away from these so-called masters that we've given ourselves to. Let's cover them one by one. Number one, let's start with the word success. The word success today, if you say to someone, he's successful, 9 times out of 10, we are talking about money. Whether you're in the West or whether you're in the East, this is our criteria in the times that we live in. Maybe in the past, it used to be knowledge, maybe it used to be wisdom, maybe it used to be bravery, maybe it used to be other things. But in the world that we live in today, if you say he is successful, then what we mean by success is he has a lot of money, he has a lot of assets, he has a lot of cars, he is loaded. That's what we basically mean. He's very successful, right? And even as Muslims, we've started using this terminology. So let's speak about the master that people have made, and that is money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran in Surah Kahf, Allah mentions Al-Mal wal-Banun. Wealth and children are but adornments of the worldly life, but the enduring good deeds are better in the sight of your Lord for reward and for hope. These things are just there as a adornment in this dunya. The reality is, think about it. If you earn a certain amount, let's say you need this many dollars per month, if we use that currency, you need this many dollars per month to maintain your lifestyle, this many rupees per month to maintain your lifestyle, to eat, to drink, to be under, to have shelter. If you earn, for example, $1,000 a month, once you get past that amount, which is your basic needs, after that, what you will find is whether you earn 2,000, fine, you could buy a few more nicer things, etc. 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. What you realize is human beings actually have very limited needs. Once those needs are met, we don't actually need that much. So why are we earning money? It's actually to show others that I'm successful. It's actually to show others that, wow, look at me. Look at how successful I am. So many people, brothers and sisters, there might be people in your family as well like this. They don't want to have such huge, elaborate weddings. They wouldn't mind just having a small wedding in a very modest setting. That's who they are. But why are they doing these things? It's simply to please people. So what we see is that these masters that people have, they're actually linked. We want money for money itself, but then we want money to please others. And with each of these, inshallah, masters that we have, that people have made, what I want to mention is a hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did our tarbiyah. He was there to explain the Quran. He was there to nourish us spiritually, to explain the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to do our tazkiyah, as is mentioned in the Quran, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he mentioned in a hadith in Sahih Muslim 2958, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the son of Adam says, my wealth, but what belongs to him of his wealth except what he ate and consumed, what he wore and made old, or what he gave in charity and stored for himself in the hereafter. What we learn is there's 3 categories of wealth that we actually use. We say our wealth, but what belongs to him of his wealth except what he ate and what he consumed? What you actually eat, you actually literally put into your body and you use. You go to the grocery store, you buy some fruit, you buy meat, you cook it and you eat it. You actually use that. Number 2, you buy clothes, you wear them, they get worn out, and you've actually used them. Besides these 2 things, the 3rd category the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave, he said, or what he gave in charity and stored for himself in the hereafter. Everything else that we have, we are basically thinking that these are investments, these are things that we should be putting things into. But the reality is, the 3rd category the Prophet gave, this is the category we should be investing in. Our time, our wealth, our abilities, it should be going into the akhirah. And we'll add one thing, because this is understood. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in ayah number 143 of Surah Al-Baqarah, and thus we have made you a moderate nation. There's no extremes in Islam. There's no moderate Islam, there's no liberal Islam, there's just Islam. And Islam itself is balanced. Islam itself is perfect. So having given this example, this doesn't mean, for example, you decide that I'm going to walk now, I'm not going to buy a car. I'm going to not buy any clothes more than my basic necessities. I'm not going to get anything good in this world. No, this is not the reason I'm mentioning this. Rather, what the reason I'm mentioning this is that we don't become slaves. We don't become slaves of money, slaves of these things. Another example, another master. And let me just add one thing here. Some people, they say, I'm not religious. I just live my own life and I don't have any masters. The reality is, if you look at their lifestyle, they will have one master or the other. If you are not submitting to Allah, if you are not doing things for Allah, you are most definitely, or actually 100%, you're doing them and worshipping another creator. Creator, you're worshipping another master that you've made. If it's not money, person could say, I'm not worshipping money, then there is another master, and that is you are worshipping your own self. We see in like t-shirts, on billboards, you see even on cups, branding everywhere. Do what makes you happy. Love yourself, do what makes you happy. And although that could have a positive meaning as well, one of the things that it pushes you to do is basically just care about yourself. Forget other people. Forget about responsibilities. If you have kids, if you have responsibilities, if you have elderly parents, if you have to fulfill your responsibilities, forget these people. Run away and just make yourself happy. And that's the reality of the world we live in, an individual society where we just care about me, myself, and I. So this is what happens. If you're not worshipping Allah, you are most likely, or 100%, you're worshipping something else. So we talked about money. What other master, what other quote unquote God are people taking? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Furqan in ayah number 43. Allah mentions, have you seen the one who takes his desires as his God? Now this is an extremely dangerous thing, because the thing about our desires is there's no end to them. A person who has desires for wealth, for fame, or whatever desire there may be in the world, it is never ending. You are never truly satisfied. And this is the reality of the dunya. The dunya, by its nature, is something that's limited, and it's something that's insufficient, and it's something that will finish. And so these desires will never make us happy. And if we don't control our desires, then this is something that puts us into depression itself. I remember being on a bus in London a few months ago, and I remember seeing this very strange scenario playing out in front of me. I saw this man. He was someone who looked like he was drunk, intoxicated, and he was on the bus, and on the bus there, you're not actually allowed to carry alcohol because the harms that it has, etc. This is understood, right? And you're prohibited from drinking alcohol on the bus in public areas, etc., like that. And this person, I saw that he was on the bus. He had hidden a can of alcohol in his jacket, and I heard the sound of the can opening, and I looked towards him, and I saw that he was hiding from other people, trying to hide himself, and he was sipping the alcohol, trying not to get caught. And I really thought to myself, how strange is it that a person is in such a situation that he cannot even wait a few minutes to get off the bus, go to a park or go wherever, and do what they need to do, regardless of the harms and it being haram. I was just thinking from the perspective of the fact that this guy can't control himself. He is so he's so controlled by his desires that he cannot even give it a few minutes. Get on the bus, get off at your stop, and then carry on with your day. And it really made me think. This is an example of alcohol. This could be the case with the desire of sexual desires for a person. This could be the case for the desire for earning money. This could be the case for desire for wanting friends and wanting fame. Wanting friends and wanting having a social circle is fine. Having fame and those can be very negative. Any desire that a person has, you can basically become a slave to it. And subhanallah, you may have seen the people who are drug addicts. You know, people who are walking around streets and they're picking up remnants of people's cigarette butts and filters, and they're trying to get just a whiff from whatever's left on the ground. And when you look at that, you think, subhanallah, what has a human being done to himself? The reality is, brothers and sisters, if we don't control our desires, if you don't channel your desires and control them, you basically become an animal. If you don't control your desire for eating, you become obese, lazy, and you can see that in your body as well. You would hate to look like that. If you don't control your sleep, you're sleeping all day and then you feel miserable waking up late. You know, sometimes when you were young, summer holidays, you'd wake up so late, you wake up later in the day, and you would feel really sad inside. And thus is the explanation, or we could go into other examples of desires. The reality is, if you don't control your desires, if you don't have a control over them, then they become controlling over you. And an example of desires that scholars have given is like that of a horse, your nafs, like a horse, an animal. If you're on top of the animal, you're holding it by its reins, you're the one in control. You decide when to sleep. You decide, it's Ramadan right now, I don't have to eat, so I'm not going to eat. You decide that I'm not married right now, so I'm not going to talk to any person outside marriage. I'll wait till I get married. You decide, you're in control, you're strong. But if you let desires control you, it's like an animal running and you're just basically on your face and you're being dragged on the floor by that animal. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the fitna of desires. And this is what fasting teaches us, brothers and sisters. It teaches us to control ourselves. Control your anger, control your speech, control your stomach, control your drink, no matter how much you want to eat or drink, you control yourself. So this is something that we should be very wary of. Another example, another master that people have are the master, and that is people. People. People worship people. How? There's a funny story of a man walking, and I believe you could understand the phrase in Urdu, but I'll just mention it in English. And that's basically a man is walking with his son, and they have their donkey, the animal, with them. And they're walking, and the father is sitting on the donkey, and the son is walking. And then they think to themselves, you know, people, they're going to say, what a selfish father, making his son walk, should take care of his son. So his son sits on the donkey and the father walks. Then they thought to themselves, what if people say, what a selfish son, not letting his elderly father sit on the donkey with him, on the animal with him. What a selfish son. So what do? They both get off and they start walking. And then what do they think people will say? People would say, what stupid two people. They have an animal and they're not using it. So then both of them sit on it. And then people say, look at these two oppressive people. That's a single animal. He can only take a certain amount of weight, and both of them, they're both sitting on this animal, that poor donkey, that poor animal. So then what do these two people do? They take the donkey and they put it on his head. They hold the donkey and they put it on their head, right? As a mark of frustration, as in you can never please people. The son is sitting there, the father's sitting there, they're both sitting there, they're not, you can never please people. This is basically, this little story, it shows you a lot about society. You can never make people happy. Now, that doesn't mean you start being mean to people and start oppressing people because you're like, they're not gonna be happy. You do what Allah wants. You try your best. You have the best manners. But in the end, if Allah is pleased with you and you've tried your best, you've tried your best to be kind to people and you've done your part, then you do not need to worry if people are pleased with you or if they're not. For example, if you need to do an act of ibadah, imagine if you are at a family event and there is something that is haram that is going to happen at the event. Okay, let's say that there is the environment has free mixing and there's people dancing or there's music, etc., etc., and you decide to leave that environment. If you have left that and you say excuse yourself in a polite manner, not in an aggressive manner going crazy at them, but in a polite manner, you excuse yourself and you make it clear that this is why I'm going, because I can't be in such an environment. Now, if they're unhappy with you, that's absolutely fine. If you're screaming and shouting at them and you have bad manners, yeah, that's completely wrong. But if Allah is happy with you, then that's all that matters. So that's something important to know. Another thing to keep in mind is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-An'am, Allah mentions, if you obey most of those on earth, they will mislead you. They will lead you away from the path of Allah. If you look at most of society, look at the trajectory of society, look at it in terms of morals, in terms of manners, in terms of dealing with your elders. If you look at society and just go on social media or don't go on social media, you'll see the effect that society has on people and the downward trajectory that we have in our morals. How people are basically selling themselves online. They're sharing personal stories. They're doing silly things just for the camera, just for views. And you're surprised that how can human beings bring themselves to such a low? The reality is, if you obey most of people on the earth, they're going to mislead you from the way of Allah. And so one thing that a Muslim needs to have is he needs to have resilience. Goes back to having self-control. Sometimes you're going to have to go against the crowd. Sometimes you're going to be at a gathering, no one is praying, and you're going to have to pray salah. Sometimes you're going to have to leave that gathering. Sometimes you're going to have to leave a job because it's haram to work in a particular field. Sometimes you're going to have to make decisions that you're going to have to walk on your own, and people are going to look down at you. Maybe they're going to laugh at you. Maybe they're going to call you silly. Like we were in Surah Al-Baqarah, when it said to the people who have a disease in their heart, meaning the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, when it says to them, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ, when it said to them, believe like the people have believed, they say, قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاء, should we believe like the fools have believed? And the reason that they say that they're fools is because for them, the people who believe, the people who have iman, they're fools because they give akhirah priority to the dunya. And a munafiq, the person who is a hypocrite, the dunya is everything for him. So someone who is prioritizing the akhirah, he's an idiot for them. Wa na'udhu billah. But that's the reality, because they only see the dunya. They only see this world. They don't look at the akhirah. So why am I mentioning this point? We're going to have to, brothers and sisters, we're going to have to go against the wave at times. We're going to have to go against what society is telling us at times. And so for that, we need to have resilience. We need to have willpower. And what we're studying in this month, what inshallah I'm reading and you're reading in this month, is the Quran. We spoke about how Quran is the rope of Allah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ. If you remember a few days ago, we spoke about this. If you're tightly holding onto the Quran, then you are safe. Then you will be able to go past these obstacles. But if you're wavering and you're holding on to it sometimes and you're letting it go sometimes and you're a little wishy-washy, then you will just go with the tide and you will be finding yourself drowning in desires drowning in this dunya before you know it. So this is something that we need to be careful of. Another example, another master that people have, we'll quickly mention this and then we'll wrap up the class, is the master of fame and the master of fame and status. The world that we live in, social media age, an age where anyone can make any page on YouTube or any social media platform, and any nobody can become a somebody just by having millions of views, even if that person has nothing to offer to the world, nothing good to offer to the world. So this desire for fame and status, this is something that we have to take out of our hearts. And I'll mention a couple of things that will help us. Number one, brothers and sisters, I know this is something that's hard to digest, but the reality is most people care about themselves, and we think more about ourselves. We think that people think more about us than they actually do. There's an example that I read online. I remember about a person who's giving his life to his job, and it was mentioned to him that if you died that same week, the HR department in your work, they would send out an email to replace you, and you're the one who's giving over hours and trying to please your boss and trying to put your life to it, basically trying to give you a perspective that this is a job, don't give your life to it, don't sacrifice your life for it. And so this is the reality. The reality is that people will forget you. Today you're here in janazas, brothers and sisters, in the janaza, within a few minutes while the burial is taking place, there's people who are laughing. So, and then subhanallah, just a few minutes after they bury you, there would be people who are eating and they would be commenting on this food, that this is too salty and I don't like this, and I thought that I could have eaten this today. This is the reality of the world. Why would we give ourselves and give away our good deeds by doing them for people when people can't reward us and people will forget us? The one who's watching right now and the one who can actually reward you is Allah. So why don't we do our deeds for Allah so we can be rewarded by Allah? So this is the fourth master that we want to look at. The fifth master, and we'll finish with this, and that master that people have given that status to is the master of fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety, the fear of failing. A man is fearful of not doing well, not having the best job. People ask you, what are you doing for work? What's going on? Are you married yet? Etc. etc. And they have this fear of failure. They have this anxiety in them. People, why are they doing haram and earning haram? Because they have a fear that if I don't earn this haram money, I'm not going to get rizq. I'm not going to get money. How can we break away this? Brothers, there's one word, and that word is tawakkul. If we have tawakkul in Allah, if we put our trust in Allah, then you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens your doors, opens doors for you. This could be tawakkul, brothers, in wealth. If you have a haram or halal job and you go for the halal, even if it's less, haram or halal relationship, you keep yourself patient, you wait. It could be haram or halal job, haram or haram relationship, or anything in this dunya. You basically stick to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Brothers, you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens doors. Whoever has taqwa of Allah, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, whoever has taqwa of Allah, يَخْرَجَ, he will create for them a makhraja. He will create for them an exit, a way out. And this is mentioned in Surah Talaq. So this is something that we should remember. Let's finish our class here. There are actually some other things that we can talk about, but we will finish here. What was the conclusion? What we learned today? There are people who have many masters. Allah gives an example of a slave who has many masters and one who has one. And then Allah says that are they equal? Alhamdulillah, but most of them don't know. So brothers and sisters, this Ramadan, let's take away all of these other masters in society that people have given. Let's dedicate ourselves to Allah. Let's put our blood, sweat and tears for Allah's religion, for serving Allah, everything that we do for Allah, we live for Allah, and we die for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll see that if we do this, our life will be happy, and inshallah, our hereafter will be happy. So we'll conclude here. The class has gone a little bit longer than I expected today, but inshallah, we will meet on Monday. So we'll have a few days. If any of you have missed any of the previous classes, you can cover them in the weekend, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.